The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was not peaceful. It was the quiet of a grave. The great circular room was full, but no delegate moved. On the main viewer, the final images from Elysian Prime played on a loop, not of the battle's start, but of its end. The once proud Trelixian fleet drifted like broken toys in a pond. The sleek dreadnought Worldbreaker was a dark, dead shape against a bright planet, and buzzing through it all, like flies on a carcass, were the human drones. The cicadas. Ambassador T. Laura stood at her podium. The fear was gone from her now. It had been replaced by a heavy, cold certainty. She did not need to raise her voice. The Trelixian hegemony declared a police action, she said. Her translated words flat in the still air. They brought a fleet designed for a war of dominance, of show and counter-show. Humanity did not bring a better fleet. They brought a solution, a final one. She changed the image. Now it showed data, not pictures. It was human historical data, graphs of industrial production from a conflict called World War II, pictures of car factories making tanks, of women in factories building planes, of a society bending every single effort, every thought, towards one goal. You see, they do not have a war mode and a peace mode, T. Laura explained, her dark eyes moving from delegate to delegate. They have a normal mode and a survival mode. When switched, the entire civilization becomes a single, focused organ. Its purpose is not to gain land or honor. Its purpose is to erase the threat. Completely, utterly. The Trelixians did not lose a battle. They lost the ability to wage war in that theater, in a matter of hours. That was the humans' first and only move. The Trelixian ambassador's podium was empty. Kervak was gone, recalled in disgrace. In his place stood a lower-ranking official who looked as if he wanted to be anywhere else. The main doors opened. Every eye turned. Hannah and John walked in. They moved to the center of the chamber. There was no sound but the soft click of Hannah's shoes on the floor. She looked tired, but her back was straight. John stood beside her, a statue of quiet vigilance, the council president, a being of swirling gas contained in a suit, pulsed with subdued light. Ambassador Hannah, you have returned. We never left, Hannah said, her voice clear. We only went home to deliver your message. And our answer. She placed a data slate on the central console. A stream of information flowed to every delegate. This is a live feed from the Sol system, from Mars, from the Jupiter orbital yards. What you are seeing is not military expansion. It is industrial adjustment. The feeds showed civilian factories. Auto plants where ground cars were once assembled now produce drone chassis. Textile mills wove sensor-reflective mesh. School 3D printer labs ran day and night. Printing guidance circuit boards. You provoked us, Hannah said. And for the first time, a flicker of raw emotion showed not anger, but profound disappointment. You forced a choice between the survival of our people and the obedience to an unjust law. We choose our people, so we have activated our survival protocol. The Trelixian hegemony started a war. We will finish it, unless this council acts to restrain the true aggressor and nullify its illegal demand. This conflict will grow. We have no interest in conquering Trelixian worlds. We have every interest in ensuring they can never threaten a human home again. Our patience is gone. Our harvest, she said, echoing John's word from days before, is underway. A chill went through the room. It was not a declaration of war. It was a declaration of process. They were not facing an enemy. They were facing a machine that had started to turn. The Trelixian representative finally found his voice. It was a plea, not a demand. This is disproportionate. You have destroyed our fleet. What more do you want? John answered. His eyes were on the Trelixian, but his words were for the whole council. We did not seek your fleet. It was in our way. We do not seek your worlds. They are irrelevant. The threat was your capability and your will to take what is ours. That capability in the Elysian sector is gone. Your will remains. That must change. The council descended into a panic of whispered arguments. But the power balance had shifted. The Trelixians were not the strong ones anymore. Humanity was not strong in the old way. They were relentless. It was a new, terrifying form of power that, in the end, the council did not vote. It pressured, it begged, the Trelixian government. Seeing their frontline fleet erased and facing the prospect of a war against an enemy that produced defeat like a farmer grows wheat, capitulated that Hannah laid out the terms. Full Trelixian withdrawal from all systems near human space, a public apology, massive reparations, paid not to governments, but directly to the individual colonists of Elysian Prime, and the permanent demilitarization of the so-called Sacred Nebula. The message was clear. The cost of bullying humanity would bankrupt you and leave you defenseless. The Trelixian agreed. The galaxy watched that months later on Elysian Prime. The scars were healing. The new orbital defenses were not sleek warships, but simple drone platforms, quiet and dormant. On the surface, in a rebuilt garden overlooking a green valley, three figures met. Hannah and John stood with Ambassador T. Laura. The air was warm, filled with the buzz of native insects. Your people have a new name in the council records, T. Laura said. Her feathers a calm blue once more. They call your homeworld the Arsenal. They mean it as an insult, a mark of fear. John looked out at the valley. An arsenal is a place of last resort, a thing you hope never to use. The name is accurate. You showed them the context, Hannah said to T. Laura. You saw what others refused to see. We saw the pattern in your history, T. Laura replied. A pattern of ending existential threats by any means necessary. The council, they still think you are monsters. Hannah picked a leaf from a nearby plant, rubbing it between her fingers. We are what we have always been, a species that would rather build gardens than warships. But we have never forgotten how to burn down a forest to stop a wildfire from reaching our home. Ensure the council never forgets that, either. A group of children ran laughing through a field nearby, their voices carried on the wind. Above, in the clear blue sky, a single drone glided silently, a dark speck against the sun. A quiet guardian. T. Laura watched it. Then the children. She understood now. The duality was the point. The kindness and the cold fury were two sides of the same coin. You could not have one without the other, as they said their goodbyes. A new law was being ratified in the distant Galactic Council. It was called the Human Proviso. It was simple. It stated that no species, regardless of political disagreement, should be pushed to the point of existential threat. The cost, it noted, was not just war, but the transformation of a civilization into something that could end all war in its sector forever. It was a law born not of wisdom, but of fear. On the ride back to orbit, John looked at the peaceful world shrinking below them. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. Hannah leaned back in her seat. "The peace? Maybe. Or maybe someone will forget the lesson in a few generations. They will see our gardens and forget we also know how to make poison. If they do, they will provoke us again, and we will remind them." The ship turned towards the stars, leaving the green world behind. In the quiet of the cabin, the only sound was the gentle hum of the engines, a sound not so different from the buzz of cicadas, waiting underground for their time to rise. The news did not travel faster than light, but it traveled fast enough. The first garbled reports from the edge of the Elysian Prime system reached the Galactic Council station as frantic. Panic signals from Trelixian support ships that had been waiting safely away from the battle. They spoke of a swarm. They spoke of a defeat. It took time for the clearer pictures to arrive. When they did, the council chamber was called into an emergency session. No one was prepared for what they saw. Ambassador T. Laura stood silently at her podium, watching the horror dawn on the faces of the others. The main viewer showed the aftermath. It was not the clean, dramatic explosion of a ship destroyed in a duel. It was a mess. It was a slaughterhouse of broken technology. Trelixian cruisers drifted with their sides punched full of neat, small holes. Their beautiful hulls were scarred and blackened from countless tiny impacts. The mighty World Breaker was a dead, dark shape, a spearhead blunted and floating aimlessly. And everywhere, like flies on a corpse, were the small, simple shapes of human drones. Some were still moving, methodically scanning the wreckage. Others were simply inert, their purpose spent. The Trelixian ambassador, Provoke, was gone. His second in command, a lesser official named Vec, stood at their podium. His forearms hung limply at his sides. He had no boast, no demand. He looked broken. The council president's voice, usually so calm, wavered. "Ambassador Vec, can you confirm this? Imagery?" Vec seemed to struggle to speak. It is confirmed. The Trelixian fleet, the police action force, has been neutralized. Commander Verlick is a prisoner. The World Breaker is a hull." He said the words as if he did not understand them himself. A delegate from an aquatic species, their body floating in a liquid tank, bubbled with agitation. "How? The human fleet was a fraction of the size. Our own intelligence confirmed it." T. Laura finally moved. She stepped forward, and all eyes turned to her. There was no pleasure in her face, only a profound and weary sadness. "You are asking the wrong question," she said, her voice husky in the quiet room. "You are still thinking in terms of fleets, of ships versus ships. You do not understand what you are looking at." She manipulated her console. The image zoomed in on one of the human drones. It was a crude, ugly thing. No elegant lines, no proud insignia. It was a weapon stripped down to its bare purpose, a sensor, an engine, a warhead. This, T. Laura said, is not a warship. It is a bullet, a smart, cheap bullet. The humans did not build a better navy. They built a better factory. They built a system whose only product is the end of another's ability to fight. She brought up another image, this one from Human History Archives. It showed rows and rows of simple aircraft in a vast factory. They have done this before. When their existence was threatened, they stopped making luxury goods. They stopped making anything that did not contribute to survival. They turned their entire society into a machine that made one thing: victory. They called it total war. The concept does not exist in our galactic lexicon. War, for us, is a contest of power. For them, when backed into a corner, it is a function of industry, a cold, mathematical equation. She turned to face the stunned council. You voted to give away their colony. You backed them into that corner. Ambassador Vex sent a fleet to push them further. And they have responded as their history warned they would. Not with a roar of defiance, but with the quiet, terrifying hum of 1,000,000 factories turning. They are not fighting the Trelixians. They are disassembling them. Vec found his voice, a thin thread of anger. This is barbaric. It is without honor to send mindless machines. Honor? T. Laura interrupted, her tone sharp. Honor is a luxury for those who fight for pride. They are fighting for their home. When you fight for your home, you use whatever tool works. You use the most efficient tool. And humanity, when threatened, becomes the most efficient tool for ending threats the galaxy has ever seen. The chamber erupted into chaotic arguments. Fear was now the dominant scent in the air. The Trelixians were not the biggest power anymore. Something new and incomprehensible had taken the stage at that moment. The main doors opened. Hannah and John walked in. The noise died instantly. Every strange eye was fixed on them. They walked to the center of the chamber, the same spot where they had stood defeated days before. Hannah's face was calm, but it was not the calm of diplomacy. It was the calm of a glacier. John's eyes swept the room, and delegates flinched under his gaze. Hannah did not wait for permission to speak. The Trelixian hegemony launched an unprovoked attack on a human world under a false legal pretext. That attack has been repelled. The attacking force has been eliminated as a military asset. Her words were clean, clinical. She offered no data slate, no plea. She stated facts. The unified government of Earth, she continued, now recognizes that the Galactic Council is either unable or unwilling to restrain aggressive expansionism. Therefore, we will ensure our own security. She nodded to John. He activated a small device. The main viewer changed. It no longer showed the battlefield. It showed live feeds from inside the human sphere, a factory on Mars, where assembly lines that once built ground transports were now producing drone engines, an orbital facility near Jupiter, where smelters were consuming asteroids and stamping out armored plating at a staggering rate, a school on a lunar colony, where children were learning to code simple targeting algorithms for civilian-grade computers. You provoked a society at peace, Hannah said, her voice like iron wrapped in silk. You have awakened a society at war, not a war of conquest, but a war of survival. And in a war of survival, every foundry, every farm, every child's education becomes a weapon. The Trelixian hegemony has declared war on the principle of human safety. We did not start this, but we will finish it. She looked directly at the Trelixian podium. Unless this council acts to immediately and permanently restrain the Trelixian hegemony, nullify their illegal claim, and punish their aggression, this conflict will escalate. We have no desire to rule your worlds, but we have an absolute need to remove your ability to threaten ours. Our patience is exhausted. She let the words hang. The feeds from the human factories kept playing, a silent, relentless proof of her words. You called it a harvest, T. Laura said from her podium, her voice barely a whisper, but it carried in the silence. That day in my quarters, you said it was a switch you never wanted to flip. John turned his head and looked at her. He gave a single, small nod. The harvest, he said, has begun. The council president pulsed with agitated light. Ambassador Hannah, what are your terms? Hannah's smile was thin and held no warmth. Our terms are no longer for you to debate. They are for the Trelixian hegemony to accept. They will be delivered directly. This session is over. She turned and, with John at her side, walked out of the chamber. They left behind a silence heavier than any noise. The delegates looked at the screens, the broken Trelixian fleet, the humming human factories, and they finally, truly, understood T. Laura as desperate warning. Do not provoke humanity. They had, and now they were watching the first, terrifying fruits of that provocation grow in real time. The galaxy had changed forever, not with a bang, but with the relentless, grinding sound of industry. The Trelixian fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Elysian Prime system with beautiful, terrible precision. Ships arranged themselves in a classic battle formation, a layered wall of polished metal and glowing energy cannons. At its center was the World Breaker, a dreadnought shaped like a massive spearhead. On its bridge, Commander Verlick watched the blue-green world on the main screen. It was a pretty thing. He felt nothing but a cold sense of duty, mixed with contempt. Scanned the system. He ordered his sensor officer, a junior Trelixian with nervous hands, worked his console, reading the human Colonial Defense Force. 3 small frigates in high orbit. Planetary surface batteries are powering up. They are what we expected. But there are anomalous energy readings from the moon's shadow and within several asteroid clusters. Low signature, difficult to pinpoint. Verlick snorted. Hiding, a coward's tactic. They hope to ambush. Send a demand. A channel was open to the planet and its meager fleet. Verlick's face, stern and unyielding, appeared on every screen. People of Elysian Prime, your government has rejected the lawful ruling of the Galactic Council. By the authority granted to us, we are here to secure this world and restore order. You have 1 hour to stand down your defenses and surrender control. Any resistance will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. Do not throw your lives away for a lost cause. On the bridge of the human flagship, which was not in orbit around the planet, but hidden behind its moon, Admiral Lee watched the transmission end. He was an older man, with a calm face that looked like it had been carved from stone. John stood beside him, having arrived just before the fleet. They are very confident, John observed. They have every right to be, Lee replied, his voice quiet. By their math, they have already won. Their math is wrong. Signal all units. Execute plan Waking Storm. Stage 1. Appear weak. In orbit of elision. The 3 human frigates moved. They did not attack. They formed a tight, defensive triangle around the main orbital station, their shields glowing brightly. It was a noble, futile gesture. As predicted, Verlick said, a smile touching his mouth. A symbolic defense. Move the fleet into medium orbit. Target the lead frigate. One blast from the primary lance. Let them see the cost of pride. The world breaker hummed with power. A beam of pure, violet energy, thick as a building, lanced across the void. It struck the human frigate, the Courage, directly on the Trelixian bridge. They expected a flash, then debris. Instead, something strange happened. The outer hull of the Courage seemed to dissolve. Great armored plates vaporized into a cloud of superheated gas, taking the fury of the plasma beam with them. When the light faded, the Courage was scarred and venting atmosphere, but it was still there, still functioning. Its shields had never even been touched. What was that? Verlick barked. Some form of sacrificial armor, Commander, the sensor officer stammered. They let entire sections of their ship be destroyed to absorb the energy. Before Verlick could process this bizarre, wasteful tactic, Admiral Lee's face appeared on his main screen. The human looked old and tired, but his eyes were like chips of flint. Commander Verlick, Lee said, you have fired upon a human vessel in the defense of a human world. This is your only warning. Withdraw now. Verlick felt his anger rise. This was not how it was done. There was no honor in this strange armor. There was only stubbornness. You were warned, human. You chose this. All vessels target that station. Destroy it. As the Trelixian fleet began to reorient, Admiral Lee turned away from the screen on his own bridge. He looked at John and gave a single, small nod. Then he spoke a word, not to the Trelixians, but to his own crew. The word was simple, cicada. Across the system, lights woke up. In the dark shadow of the moon, the angular, unadorned human ships powered up fully. They did not look like proud warships. They looked like factory tools. Hatches slid open from the moon's surface, from hidden silos on Elysian itself, and from the bellies of the human ships. They emerged. Not missiles, not fighters, but drones. They were the size of a small ground car, with no cockpit, just a sensor cluster and a simple engine. They were cheap, simple, and there were thousands of them. Tens of thousands. They streamed into space like a storm of metal insects, their movement chaotic, without any formation. The Trelixian sensor screens lit up with a blizzard of small, fast-moving contacts. Point defense. Engage! Verlick shouted, a first hint of unease in his voice. The Trelixian ships were equipped with excellent point defense lasers. They began to fire, slicing through the incoming swarm. Dozens, then hundreds of drones vanished in silent explosions. It did not matter. For every one destroyed, 10 more took its place. They were too many, and they were too fast in their random, darting patterns. The first wave reached the outer Trelixian cruisers. These drones did not carry explosives. They were kinetic penetrators. They simply used their last burst of fuel to accelerate to a fraction of light speed and smashed into the enemy hulls. They did not destroy the ships. They punched small, deep holes, crippling external systems, slicing through sense arrays, and jamming weapon ports. Chaos erupted on the Trelixian comms. Ships were reporting minor but critical damage. We've lost lateral thrust. Primary targeting is offline. Then the second wave arrived. These drones emitted focused electromagnetic pulses. They fried circuits and blinded sensors. Whole sections of Trelixian ships went dark and silent, drifting helplessly. Focus fire. Target their carrier ships behind the moon. Verloc roared, gripping the railing of his bridge. The elegant battle was gone. This was a brawl. A group of Trelixian destroyers managed to turn their main guns towards the human ships. They fired. Again, the human vessels did not raise shields. More of their strange, external armor pods vaporized, absorbing the blasts. The human ships weathered the storm, scarred and battered, but still operational. Their only job was to survive and keep releasing the swarm. The third wave of drones was the smallest and the most deadly. They weaved through the chaotic battlefield, ignored by the overwhelmed point defense systems. They were the hunters. Each one carried a tiny, contained antimatter charge. One found the engine housing of a Trelixian cruiser. It attached itself and detonated. The blast was not massive, but it was perfectly placed. The cruiser's drive core failed catastrophically, and the ship tore itself apart in a brilliant, silent flower of fire that another cluster of hunter drones zeroed in on the world breaker. They ignored the powerful shields at the bow, swarming over the ship's spine, seeking the less protected reactor vents near the stern. Trelixian point defense lasers tracked them desperately, shooting them down one by one. But it only took one, a single drone. Its body half melted from a laser graze, tumbled through a vent opening. A second later, the stern of the great dreadnought bloomed with light from the inside. The world breaker shuddered violently. All its lights died. It was not destroyed, but it was dead in space, a floating, powerless hulk on his bridge. Verloc was thrown to the floor. The lights were emergency red. The hum of power was gone, replaced by the sickening silence of a dead ship. He could hear the panic of his crew. He stared at the main screen, which was flickering. It showed the outside view. His mighty fleet was in disarray. Ships were drifting, crippled. Others were trying to flee, but were being harried by the endless, mindless swarm. The 3 human frigates they had come to crush were still there, damaged but intact, and from behind the moon, the human factory ships advanced, slowly, relentlessly, releasing more drones. That this was not a battle. It was not a contest of strength or honor. It was an extermination. The humans had not tried to match his fleet. They had simply, coldly built a machine to dismantle it. Admiral Lee's face appeared again on Verloc's dead console, transmitted from an external source. His expression had not changed. Your capability to wage war in this system has been removed. Commander, Lee said, his voice devoid of triumph. It was just a statement of fact. You will be allowed to evacuate your life pods. Do so quickly. The harvest is not yet complete. The channel closed. Verlick slid back against his command chair, the cold of the dead ship seeping into his bones. He looked out at the storm of simple, cheap machines still buzzing through the ruins of his fleet. He finally understood the warning no one had listened to. They had not provoked soldiers. They had provoked the hive, and the hive had answered. The journey back to Seoul was a quiet one. The ship, named Diplomat, was a comfortable vessel, but its hulls felt hollow. Hannah sat in her cabin, staring at the report on her screen. The words were dry and official, but they screamed. The Galactic Council had sided with the Trelixian hegemony. Elysian Prime was to be handed over. John entered without a sound. He placed a cup of tea on the desk next to her. It was a small, human thing in the vast, cold silence of space. The first official messages from Elysian are coming in, he said. His voice was flat. They are asking for confirmation. They cannot believe it. I can barely believe it myself, Hannah replied, not looking away from the screen. We followed every rule. We played the polite game, and we lost a world over a lie. It was never about the nebula, John said, sitting across from her. He called up a different data file. A star map appeared, highlighting Elysian Prime and the surrounding systems. Our intelligence teams have been analyzing Trelixian movements for months. Their mining guilds have filed survey claims on 3 asteroids in the Elysian sector, claims they have no legal right to make. He zoomed in. Spectral analysis graphs popped up. These rocks are rich in quantum crystalline ore, the highest grade we've ever seen. It's the key component for their new class of warp drive missiles. Hannah finally looked at him, the pieces clicking into place. So the sacred nebula was just an excuse. They needed a legal pretext to take the planet that gives them control over those asteroids. John nodded. The trespass was likely fabricated, or at best, carefully orchestrated. They led the Curiosity into that nebula with a false distress signal. We are checking. It does not matter now. The Council gave them what they wanted. Back on the Galactic Council station, the mood was different. In the grand social lounges, delegates mingled. The Trelixian contingent was celebrating in their own rough way, drinking thick, pungent liquids and making loud noises. Most other species kept their distance, offering polite, nervous congratulations. The general feeling among the council was one of relief. A messy situation had been solved. The new, emotional humans had been put in their place. The strong, stable Trelixians had been appeased. The galaxy would remain peaceful. It was a logical outcome. In a small, private observation dome, Ambassador T. Laura of the Kellen stood with a few allies. They were smaller species, scholars and historians mostly. They watched the stars turn, but no one saw their beauty. It is done, said one, a mollusk-like being named Provoke. The humans will leave their colony. It is unfortunate, but it maintains the balance. T. Laura's feathers were still dull. No, she whispered. It is not done. It has just begun. Your fears are understandable, T. Laura, Uvik said gently, his tentacles waving. The humans are passionate. They will protest. They will be angry. Then they will accept. All young species go through this. They learn that the galaxy is not fair. They learn to bend. You did not study their accords, Laura said, turning her large eyes on him. You did not see the images, not of their warships, but of their cities. You did not see what happens when they bend all their energy, all their mind, towards a single purpose, survival. In their greatest conflict, they did not just fight soldiers. They turned schools into factories. They turned farms into fuel depots. Every person, every resource became a single nerve in the body of war. They call it total mobilization. The concept does not even exist in our languages. A primitive response from a primitive time. Uvik argued softly. They are part of a civilized community now. They will follow civilized rules. You confuse technology with nature, Laura replied, her voice firm with despair. They have not changed. They have only stored that capability away. The Trelixians have not threatened a battle. They have threatened the home of 5 million human souls. They have triggered the deepest, oldest human alarm, the one that says everything is at stake. When that alarm sounds, their civilization does not negotiate. It transforms. Her words settled over the group. They were historians. They understood that patterns from the past often repeated. But the idea was too strange, too violent for their peaceful experience. On Earth, the news exploded. The networks showed the beautiful, rolling hills and sparkling cities of Elysian Prime. They showed the faces of colonists' families, farmers, scientists. The headline was simple. The galaxy votes to give our world away. There was anger. There was sadness. But there was something else, too. A deep, cold stillness that settled over the populations of Earth, Mars, the lunar colonies. It was not the heat of rage, but the chill of betrayal. A line had been crossed. Hannah and John stood before the Unified Government Council in Geneva. The room was packed. Screens showed the faces of leaders from every colony. The Trelixian demand is illegal under our own laws and a violation of the Council's spirit. Hannah reported, it is based on a fabricated crime to steal resources. Our diplomatic options are exhausted. The chairperson, an older woman named G, looked at John. Military assessment? John stepped forward. A direct confrontation with the full Trelixian fleet is not winnable with our current frontline forces. They outnumber and outgun our primary battle groups. A murmur of despair went through the room. John waited for it to quiet. However, he continued, they are expecting that analysis. They are expecting us to think like them, to see war as a contest of equal units. That is not how humanity has ever won a war for its own existence. He changed the main screen. It no longer showed fleets. It showed schematics, factory lines, automated foundries on asteroids, vast orbital 3D printers. The Trelixian doctrine is about quality. The single, powerful warship. Our doctrine, when survival is the goal, has always been about capacity. The ability to produce, adapt, and replace. To absorb a loss and return tenfold. He pointed to a simple, blocky design. A drone, we have the designs. We have the software. We have the industrial base. It is not activated. It is dormant. The cicada swarm protocol is ready. But it is a switch we have never wanted to flip. It does not conquer. It consumes. It turns industry into a weapon that exists only to destroy the enemy's ability to fight. It is the embodiment of Ambassador Laura's warning. The room was utterly silent. Chairperson G leaned forward. "What is your recommendation?" John looked at Hannah. She gave a single, slow nod. He turned back to the council. "We do not surrender Elysian Prime. We transmit our formal rejection of the council's ruling. We state our case publicly to the galaxy, and then we prepare for the consequence. We prepare to harvest not a victory, but an end." The vote of the unified government was swift. It was unanimous. A tight beam message was sent from Earth to the Galactic Council. It was one line. The unified government of Earth formally rejects the Council's ruling on Elysian Prime. The colony is, and will remain, human. When the message was decoded and displayed in the Council chamber, the relief vanished. It was replaced by confusion, then by a growing anxiety. The humans had not just protested. They had refused. This was not in the script. Kervok, the Trelixian ambassador, was furious. But beneath the fury was a glint of pleasure. Now he had a clear reason. Now he could act. He immediately requested an emergency session. He stood before the stunned council, his forearms spread wide. "This is not just rejection. This is an act of rebellion, a threat to galactic law. The Trelixian hegemony cannot allow this defiance to stand. For the safety and order of all, we declare a police action. We will secure Elysian Prime and restore the rule of law." No one objected. The council was frozen. Caught in the current of events they had started, but could no longer control that as the session closed. Laura did not go to the lounges. She went to her quarters. She looked at the message from humanity, then out at the stars. She remembered the human word John had used, that harvest, that it was a peaceful word for farmers. But the way he had said it, it sounded like the coldest word in the universe. The switch had been flipped. The warning had been ignored. Now everyone would learn what it meant to provoke humanity. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was a place of silence and soft light. It was designed to calm, to encourage quiet discussion between species who had seen stars die. Today, the air hummed with a different tension. In the center of the vast, circular room, humans stood on a polished platform. Hannah was the lead diplomat. She wore a simple, dark suit, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. Next to her stood John, her military advisor. His posture was straight, his eyes moving slowly across the faces of the assembled aliens. They were here to answer a complaint. The Trelixian hegemony's ambassador, Provoke, was speaking. He was large, with thick, gray skin and forearms that he used for dramatic effect. A holographic image floated above him, showing a small human ship, the Curiosity, drifting near a colorful cloud of gas and dust. This nebula, Provoke's voice boomed, translated by the devices everyone wore, is a sacred site to our people, a place of eternal memory. This human vessel violated its space. They scanned its depths. This is a spiritual crime. Hannah waited for him to finish. The rules of the council were strict. When she spoke, her voice was clear and even. Ambassador Provoke, the Curiosity was on a deep space survey mission. The nebula in question was not marked on any navigational chart provided by the Council. There were no warning beacons, no energy signatures indicating a protected zone. The trespass was unintentional. We offer our sincere apologies and are prepared to share all scientific data gathered, as well as provide appropriate reparations. Provoke made it sound like grinding stones. Apologies are not enough. Science? You think this is about data? Your clumsy machines disturb the echoes of our ancestors. The stain must be cleansed. We demand, and the Council must support, the transfer of the human colony on Elysian Prime to Trelixian stewardship. This will serve as a meaningful gesture of remorse. A quiet ripple went through the chamber. Elysian Prime was a prize. A world of blue oceans and green forests. One of humanity's first and most successful colonies outside of Sol. John's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Hannah did not flinch. That is a disproportionate demand, Hannah said, her tone still measured. The mistake of a single survey ship does not equate to the loss of a world where 5 million people have made their home. We again offer direct reparations and a treaty guaranteeing the nebula's borders. The Council delegates, a gathering of beings of all shapes and sensitivities, began their silent vote. Light patterns flickered on the central console. Hannah and John watched, standing still. They had been members of this galactic council for only a standard century. They were still the newcomers, the ones from the fragile world with the brittle bones and strong emotions. The Trelixians were old, powerful, and militarily strong. The math was cruel and simple. The result glowed in the air. The motion was carried. Humanity had one standard cycle to withdraw all citizens from Elysian Prime. Provoke's satisfaction was a physical thing in the air. Hannah merely bowed her head, a short, formal motion. The unified government of Earth will receive your decision, she said. Nothing more. The session was adjourned as the delegates began to drift away. Speaking in low murmurs, a small figure approached the human platform. It was Ambassador Theolora of the Kellen, a species of slender, avian-like beings with large, dark eyes. Her feathers, usually a calm blue, were flushed with a nervous gray. Ambassador Hannah, Theolora said, her voice a husky whisper through the translator. A moment. Please, Hannah nodded. John took a subtle step closer, his eyes watchful. Theolora's gaze darted around before settling back on Hannah. Your words were wise. Your offer was fair. Thank you, Ambassador. It seems fairness was not a factor today, Hannah replied. It rarely is. When the Trelixians want something, Theolora said. She leaned in, her voice dropping even further. You must make your people comply. You must give them the world. Hannah's calm expression finally showed a flicker of surprise. That is not our decision to make, and it is not a just outcome. Justice is a luxury, Theolora insisted, her thin hands trembling. You do not understand. My people, we have a long history. We study the histories of others. It is our way. We have looked at your world, your past. John spoke for the first time, his voice low. Our history is open. We have shared it. You have shared dates and events, Theolora said urgently. But you cannot share the context, the feeling. We have seen the patterns. When your kind is pushed into a corner, When survival is framed as a choice between yielding and breaking the world, you do not yield. You change. You become something else. Something that does not think in terms of ships and soldiers, but in terms of systems, of total, terrifying response. She looked at John, then back at Hannah, her dark eyes wide with a fear that seemed ancient. I tried to tell them. Before the vote, I stood and I said to the council, do not do this. You are judging them by your own logic. They do not follow it. Provoke them, and you will not face an army. You will face a storm of consequences you cannot imagine. I beg them. Please, I said, I beg the council, do not provoke humanity. Her words hung in the air. The hum of the chamber felt very distant. They called me an alarmist. Laura finished, her energy seeming to drain away. They said you are clever mammals, but ultimately logical. You will see the superior force and you will bend. It is the rational way. Hannah looked at the small alien, seeing the genuine dread. What do you believe we will do? Ambassador Laura. Laura shook her head, a human gesture she had clearly learned. I do not know the specifics. I only know the pattern. On your world, when a conflict became about the existence of your whole people, you did not fight harder. You fought differently. You turned your entire society into a single, focused weapon. You called it total war. The council, they have no concept of this. War here is about fleet maneuvers and honor duels between warships. It is a contest. For you, when truly threatened, it becomes a factory, a cold, endless factory that makes only one product: victory at any cost. Do not let them turn you into that. For your sake, and for all of ours, just give them the world. She touched Hannah's arm lightly, a gesture of desperate plea, then turned and hurried away. Her feathers still tinged with fear gray. John watched her go. She's afraid of us. Hannah let out a slow breath, the calm diplomat's mask gone for a moment, replaced by a deep weariness. She's afraid of what they might force us to remember how to be. Come on, John. We need to go home and tell 5 million people that the galaxy has just voted them off their planet. They walked in silence through the majestic corridors of the council station, past delegates of 100 species who glanced at them with pity or indifference, or in the case of the Trelixians, cold triumph. The words of the Kellen ambassador echoed in Hannah's mind, a strange, prophetic warning in the middle of a crushing diplomatic defeat that do not provoke humanity. She looked at John, his face set like stone, already thinking, planning. She thought of the people on Elysian Prime, of the factories on Mars and the orbital yards over Earth. She thought of human history, not as dates, but as a story of resilience, of a stubborn, terrifying refusal to be extinguished, a small, cold knot formed in her stomach. Laura was not wrong about the pattern. The council, in its wisdom, had just pushed the button to see if it still worked. They were all about to find out.